Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Our students appreciate it too. But now I'm going to pass it over to Courtney, who's going to start asking some questions from our panel.
Okay, so we're just going to go, just as a reminder, just in the same order that we did as the introductions. So we're going to start with Amelia. And so why did you choose to attend UVM, and what attracted you to your undergraduate major?
Sure. So, and I'll just fill in because others gave their graduation year. I graduated in 2001. And I'm a Vermonter. I grew up in Jericho, Vermont. And aside from my study abroad to England through UVM my junior year, I really haven't left Vermont a ton for living. Certainly have traveled, pretty extensively otherwise. But I'm a Vermonter. And so I grew up with UVM in my backyard. And honestly, I wasn't necessarily crazy about going to UVM because it was kind of, everybody kind of thought of it as kind of the backyard school, and it was so much more exciting to go someplace else. But that feeling kind of quickly dissipated once I arrived, and I got to, connect with the professors and other students and just people from other backgrounds, and really got myself enmeshed in the life of the university. So, certainly very grateful for being at UVM and having those experiences. As far as my undergraduate major of history, I always enjoyed history in high school and earlier, and I loved reading and literature, and so I was an English minor as well. And so history just seemed like a natural progression based on my interests. I went into it without any real idea of what I wanted to do for a job afterwards. But I felt I had a really good foundation from history that you could use in a lot of scenarios of some of the critical thinking skills and research skills. As a history major, some of the students who are history or liberal arts majors are familiar with people always asking if they want to be a teacher. That's kind of the default question. And, I wasn't ruling out being a teacher, but there's really so many other paths available for liberal arts majors and history majors. And I'm an example of one of them, and there's a ton more as well. So that's my answer.
Great.
All right, my turn. So the question is, why did you choose to attend UVM, and what attracted you to your major, correct? Is that what we're asking here?
Yeah.
All right, so needless to say, I actually, somewhat like Amelia, UVM was actually a secondary option for me. I attended Syracuse University, where I studied communications for 2 years. After 2 years, I realized that broadcast journalism was not something that very much intrigued me as a career option. And I was from Vermont. And so needless to say, it was a natural transition, because one of the things that I missed in being at Syracuse was I missed my love of the outdoors. Wasn't satisfied. I was unable to ski. I was unable to ride my bike. I was unable to be out in the lake. It was a function of my love of the outdoors. In terms of what attracted me to the major, and also the social atmosphere at UVM, I think, was fantastic. It was a great place to go to school. In respect to the major, what attracted me to economics and English was, in terms of economics, while I was interested in business, I was really more interested in sort of the behavior behind business and what actually, what are some of the social factors that go into business on a daily basis. And I just thought that, and the English was sort of by accident as well, in the sense I was really trying to load up on courses that I thought I could easily do well in. And so the English was by accident, but economics, I was very much interested in behavior and relationships and how sort of the macro equation impacted business. That's my story.
So I grew up right down the road from Syracuse, actually, in Ithaca, New York. And I knew that I wanted to do environmental science. And so I applied to a number of schools for environmental science. And all the other schools that I got into had like one major in environmental science and one major in environmental studies. But UVM had a whole college related to environmental issues in general. And so that, along with the fact that my best financial aid package was UVM, helped me to make that decision. The financial aid package was a significant part of that decision, as you might imagine. So I just had grew up in Ithaca, which is a town that's pretty similar to Burlington, and a lot of people are concerned about the environment, and I've always liked science, but I need to sort of have that like real world implications of the science. And so environmental science seemed like a good fit for that. So that was what attracted me to environmental science, and then just the breadth of offerings and the community around that kind of major is what brought me to UVM.
So my story is, well, I guess here's where the truth becomes a good story. I dropped out of college when I was 16. I was going to Pratt Institute, and I just need to check. Can you guys hear me or see me? Okay, cool. Yes. Because my screen just went kablooey. Anyway, so I dropped out. It was because I skipped a bunch of grades when I was a little kid and realized I was too young to be in college. So I started traveling. I walked the Appalachian Trail. I happened to do the Long Trail section in the month of September. And I said, I don't want to leave here. So I kind of settled, actually lived in Middlebury. Then I decided I needed to learn stuff. So I wanted to get into UVM. The only program at UVM that would take me was special ed, and I'm not a saint. So I realized that I needed to somehow move into a different section, which was secondary ed. I left became a high school science teacher because of botany and geology, and did that and some coaching. Actually started out teaching in South Burlington. I actually don't remember that much about the time I was at UVM, but I know I had a really excellent time. And I can tell you that summer school in Vermont is awesome. I mean, field botany. You go and pick flowers. It's just, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's my story. That's how I ended up at UVM.
Those were all wonderful answers. Thank you, everyone. It's interesting. I can find like a connection from my story with UVM with a piece of everyone else's. So it really shows how really interlocked a lot of people's choices to go to UVM are. And moving on to our next question, what inspired your shift into business? Did it occur organically over the course of your career, or was it more of kind of an abrupt change?
Sure. So this is Amelia. Starting out with my question, with my answer to the question. I suppose for me it was organic in the sense that there was never a decision point of saying, well, for my next role, for my next move in life, I really want to get into business. It was never so much business as being so distinct from, nonprofit or government or any other sector that you might work in. It was more the interesting nature of the particular business I ended up in. So after I graduated from UVM, I had a couple years working at the hospital in Burlington, and I was in the development office, which was fundraising for the hospital. And that was interesting, but I kind of wanted something a little different. I wanted a little more responsibility. And so it was actually through networking, this is kind of a plug for networking, that I was in a book group focused on fundraising topics, and there was a woman leading it who was the development person and was on her board of directors, was the CEO of the company that I ended up working for. And they were at the time looking for somebody to work on their proposals. It was a proposal writer position, and it was kind of the power of networking in the sense that at the time it was a very small company, wasn't necessarily advertising the position, and was hoping to find applicants through word of mouth and through connections. And so that's how I found out about it. I wouldn't have found out about it through any other means. And I applied and was hired. And the company focuses on environmental issues and energy efficiency. And that had always been an interest of mine, but not having a science background, I always thought, well, gee, how would I ever get a leg up in this industry? And I always thought it would be nice if I could combine my writing skills, which I always enjoyed, writing and business writing, with something to do with the environment. And that something to do with the environment happened to be the energy efficiency industry. And so I started there in 2004. And it was a small enough company that I was able to grow within the organization, take on more responsibility. And in 2010, I actually became a co-owner of the company, along with the person who was my boss for years, eventually became a business partner. And in doing something like that, you're just kind of going from one level to the next in terms of learning about all the factors affecting a business or a small business that you're not necessarily aware of when you're an employee, even in a fairly small shop. Just everything you do with hiring staff or taxes or financials. And so it was really a crash course in that element of business that, again, I never really thought I'd get into or necessarily signed up for, but it kind of came with the territory. And so for me, it's never so much having a particular interest in business as kind of a distinct endeavor separate from other things, but more having an interest in what business can do. And as a component of being involved in what business can do, you learn eventually about elements of business that are important to keep that business running and keeping people happy and keeping the money coming in and all of that. So that's how I got into business. That's my story.
So this is Brad again. In respect to how I got into business, it was, I'd say, abrupt in the sense it was immediate. I graduated from college and I moved out to San Francisco. I had wanderlust at that time, having been a native Vermonter and graduating from UVM. And I had a couple of friends who were a little older than I was, who had had some success out in the Bay Area. And it was the height of .com boom. So it was a great place to go experience. But I quickly learned, or realized even prior to that I probably couldn't sling drinks for a living, or at least not satisfy myself doing so. So regardless, I took a job with Morgan Stanley as a financial advisor. And again, that was my first job out of college. I mentioned now I'm a managing director with Bay State Financial, a much different organization. We'll talk more about that in some of the ensuing questions. But it happened right out of the gate, and it was a function of, wanting to still have relationships with people. Ours is very much a relationship-based business, and still be focused on building relationships and having that interaction on a daily basis with people and trying to help people, but yet still be in the business world. So it wasn't organic. Again, it was right out of the gates, and I'm forever grateful for my time at UVM, and the economics degree really lent itself to what I do.
So mine was fairly abrupt as well. This is Madeline again. So when I graduated, I worked at the the Spatial Analysis Lab, the Spatial Analysis Lab, which is part of the Rubenstein School, for the summer after college, and then quickly transitioned to environmental consulting. And to Amelia's point about networking, I was able to move. Every single job I've ever had I have gotten through networking. They have not been jobs that have been publicly posted. It has just been having lots of conversations with people. So I echo that networking is super important. And I did environmental consulting, as I said, and then I worked for local government, also doing geographic information systems, spatial data management, data analysis, things like that. And I had done that for about 5 years and just wasn't super satisfied with it. I'm a people person and needed to be spending a little bit less time just in front of a computer screen, and definitely needed a people-facing role. And in order to move up in the world of GIS, it really was going to be a lot of coding. And I took some classes and I realized I could do it, but I didn't really want to. So I had been casting around for my next opportunity, and I really didn't know what that was going to be. And I ran into another Rubenstein alum who I hadn't seen in years at a birthday party. And I was like, I thought you weren't in town anymore. What are you up to? And she explained the MBA program at UVM, which is all about how to do business better and how to incorporate sustainability into business. And that sounded super interesting to me. And this was a conversation we had in probably March. I contacted the program in April. I took the GREs in May, and I was accepted into the program in June. And then I started in August. So it was like very fast. And now I'm continuing to work in business. I'm working for the Center for Women in Enterprise, helping individual business owners navigate the business waters, which right now are quite wild. So
they are indeed. This is Ted. Mine was abrupt, pretty abrupt. So I'm teaching in South Burlington, and one of the things that happened is I was given all the discipline problem kids, and I am a discipline problem, so that was a little weird. Got contacted by a firm actually based in Chicago, and they heard about me from an employee there who I knew. They were looking for someone who had a science background. So I went out, had a whole bunch of interviews, came back, and then they made me an offer, which was to enter their 2-year training program. And I too had worked my way through UVM and lots of financial aid and loans and crap. But they offered me twice as much as I was making teaching to enter their 2-year training program. So I'm like, okay, why don't I do the training program and see how I feel about it? I can always blow it off and go back to teaching. So I thought about it for 30, 40 seconds and said, sure, sign me up. And then I fell in love with the business at that point, I was actually a commodities broker, which is, if you saw Trading Places with Eddie Murphy, and I was doing in the Chicago Board of Trade building. But there's no old people that do that. So I kind of shifted. Anyway, I fell in love with the business, and that was in actually 1979. Here I am.
Awesome. So thank you for everyone's stories. Those were wonderful to hear. It's also really good for students to hear that some people just kind of flowed into it, but also a lot of abrupt decisions. Just moments like a birthday party can really change a lot of people's lives. So those were wonderful to hear. And I'm going to move to my last question now. Just reflecting on the work that you do now, what aspects of your undergraduate degree have helped make you successful in your current role?
Sure. So in my major, again, was history with the English minor. And I think my role and past, current, future have all had an element of writing, which I really enjoy. Doesn't necessarily have to be, formal, lengthy proposals. I've certainly done a lot of that, but I also zip back and forth with emails, and like we all do, most of us these days. And that's just something I've always enjoyed. It's my preferred method of communication. I like taking something maybe a little abstract and boiling it down so it's easy to understand. And so history and the liberal arts always have a lot of writing in them and a lot of research and kind of reading comprehension, I would say, in terms of, plowing your way through some original primary source, and trying to understand it as best you can. And so certainly I feel like the writing and research that I did as an undergrad, writing papers and doing a lot of research, helped in my business role. Perhaps an easier transition than it might be from some people with other backgrounds who haven't done as much of that type of work in undergrad. I also always feel like history is a lot about making connections and kind of finding out the common threads between events, or kind of the social conditions that led to a political decision or that type of thing. And so in kind of a oblique way, I suppose, a lot of the work I've done over the years has involved, policy decisions, either reading through them or being impacted by them in some case, or making recommendations for different policies. And I feel in some way that draws on some of the history background as well, of making those kinds of connections, or going from maybe the cause and effect and unintended consequences and those types of things. So, you know, I think as the further you get away from your undergraduate years, especially for people who don't have like that direct professional degree or technical degree like engineering or biology, and you end up as an engineer or a biologist, you know, somebody who's a history or an economics or a you know, music major or something, they may not be using those skills in their work life. So but they draw on them kind of in a deeper way, I suppose. And as time goes on, I feel like you draw on your undergrad experience, but you also combine it with all of your life experience and all of your work experience to kind of form who you are in the working world. So that's been interesting to have the undergraduate experience kind of at the core of that, but have other things layer on top of that through the years as well. So thanks.
So in respect to how my undergraduate degree, and this is Brad again, has helped make me successful in my current role, I think it's twofold because there's two different degrees. In respect to the English, I mean, it makes it easier for me to communicate, having that background. I mean, it's simply said. I mean, although candidly, whether it be in my role as a manager of other financial planners and their staff, or whether it be my own practice, because I also have my own practice, I will tell you though that listening is probably the most important element of communication. So that is probably the best advice I could give anyone, is really learn how to listen. But needless to say, you know, English has certainly helped me in my ability to communicate both with other advisors, staff, and of course clients. But in respect to economics, it's really a matter of just being able to, again, to grasp behavior. I talked about that in the answer to the first question. Better able to assess risk. You know, Ted mentioned how he helps his clients navigate risk earlier. Love the commodities background, by the way, and the trading places reference. Orange Juice Futures, one of my favorite comedies ever. But needless to say, you know, just having a better understanding both of how people behave in respect to money and why, and then, you know, basically, you know, some of at least the basic understandings of how the macroeconomy works and being able to better grasp some of the terms and the tools at our disposal on a daily basis. So that's how economics and English has helped me.
For me, I would break it into some like skills and then some subject matter materials that have helped. And for skills, you know, I was a science major, so it meant I was dealing with data in one form or another. And data is data, whether you're looking at business models or you're looking at, you know, modeling pollutants moving through a stream. It's numbers, it's spreadsheets. What you're solving for is different, but, you know, math is the same. So I can draw on those skills and use those same spreadsheet skills, just looking at business instead. And the Rubenstein School has a big focus on how to communicate environmental goals, just because I think there's often a disconnect between environmentalists and then the rest of the world. And especially there historically has been a divide between environmentalists and business. So the Rubenstein School recognized that and did a big push on how to communicate across divides. And that is certainly something that you have to do in your everyday life, but also is incredibly important in business, because businesses are just collections of people. So it all comes down to communication. And then, you know, I got my degree in sustainability, my MBA in sustainability. And so having that background of the science helps me to apply business concepts to sustainable business models more fully. And it gives me a better understanding of some of the externalities and helps me more easily navigate conversations with both environmentalists and with business professionals.
Oh, good. My turn. So let's see what Amelia said, what Brad said, and
Madeline, Program Support North. It's either.
Which Madeline, I actually wrote it down. I still screwed that up. Anyway, one of the threads is, in my case, it's education and science, but it's being able to communicate and listen are very important words. The second part, which I want to emphasize, is science. If you learn science, even if it's rocks for jocks, if you learn science, you learn how to think. And if you know how to think, you can understand almost anything out there, because that's what it teaches you, is how to think. And that allows you to do everything, whether it's baking or business or I guess I'm hungry, so I'm thinking about cooking, but pretty much anything you do, science will help you figure out how to do it. And things like education, things like English is a good example, allows you, you know how to read and write. I know that sounds basic, but it isn't. And that's where having a broad knowledge helps you pretty much whichever direction you want to go, because you know how to think.